It's the one that you need.
Go ahead.
So go. I call to order the committee of the whole board meeting at 7 o'clock PM on Thursday, the 7th of December 2023 in the boardroom of Oak Park Forest High School, and ask the roll call, please.
Mr. Brisbane.
Here.
Dr. Marwatch. Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Ms. Williams Lee. Here. Dr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Bramley.
Here.
And Mr. Kowski.
Here. I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel of the district and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employer or against legal counsel of the district to determine its validity. Or a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. And collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
Second.
Thank you. And a roll call, please.
Dr. Marwatch. Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Ms. Williams Lee. Right here. Mr. Brisbane.
Yes.
Mr. Bramley.
Yes.
Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Kowski.
Yes. 1 minute.
Go ahead.
We are resuming open session for our committee of the whole. And our first order of business is public comment. Lisa, do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments for in person via Zoom, but I do have one to be written to minutes.
I thank you for that. Okay. Our next is an action. I move to approve the November 7, 2023 Committee of the Whole minutes as presented. Are there any corrections, adjustments that need to be made? Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
And voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. We begin our committee agenda with instruction and Dr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I'll take it. So this is the presentation of our revised 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27 calendars. Here to present this item. Dr. Sanders, Principal Parker, and Karen Sullivan. They are the three administrators on the district's calendar committee. And this information is presented in compliance with priority 2 in district policy 620. Notably, what the information that we're sharing tonight accomplishes is presents 2 brand new calendars for 2 school years beyond next year, and also a revision to the already approved 24-25 calendar. With that said, I'll turn it over to the team to give an introduction into this. This is an item that is for discussion, of course, today, and will be up for approval 2 weeks from tonight. So,
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So as it was mentioned, we have a district government committee that always does recommendations for the board as to what our school calendar should look like. This calendar committee is comprised of representatives from all employee groups, and we work collaboratively to develop recommendations. Now we're bringing today for the board's review the already approved 24-25 school calendar. So we're asking for some revisions. And how this came to be, we were looking at 25, 26, and 26, 27 calendars. Every time we develop a new calendar, we run into this problem that our 2 semesters are out of balance. Our first semester, because of all the holidays that fall during that semester, and we try to finish the first semester before winter break, it's inevitably shorter than the second semester. So if we look what we have currently in the 23-24 school year, the first semester is 85 total days, and then the second semester is 91. So why is it a problem? Because we have some semester courses. I think Linda gave an example of civics class, which is really good. So the experience of a student who takes a civic course in the second semester is much richer because they just have more instruction days. And so because of that, we started to look at how can we balance the 2 semesters. So students have the similar amount of instructional time in each of them. And we came to the realization that without a structural change, it's impossible because we would have to start school even earlier, and we already start in the second week of August. So what the committee is proposing for all 3 years to move the end of the first semester after the break. So it will be in January. It allows us to balance the days, instructional days in the first and the second semester. As part of this process, I also met with representatives from District 97 and District 90. Now, but they don't have calendars for 26 25, 26, and 26, 27 yet, but we agree where the break should fall and major holidays. One other change that we are recommending because of these discussions is taking the Veterans Day as a holiday. We have in the past years have not done it. And while it's not an official holiday, but our feeder districts often have an institute day on these days, and that was an instance this school year in 23-24. They were closed to students for attendance, and as a result, we had an attendance problem in our district. So that is the recommendation, to balance the 2 semesters and to take Veterans Day as a holiday for all 3 groups. Is there anything you would like to add?
Let's say in terms of Veterans Day, not that it is specifically special in itself, national holidays where other districts, even if it's not 97, take off, daycares and schools are closed in other suburban areas where our teachers live, and that causes childcare issues. So it just helps it for national holidays we're consistent with other districts.
Are you at the point where you want to open this up for questions?
Yes.
If I could, I'd like to prompt some questions from you before we open this up. We've had some questions from the public, and Linda, I think this is initially for you, that have really fallen into 2 camps, some concerns about this shift. On one hand, there's a question about how this affects, we've talked about how it affects students and families, but specifically how this affects student learning, and the fear that our students will be tasked with assignments and studying and just the stressors of school during the winter break. And there was a similar comment about how this would also potentially affect athletics. And so if I could turn those both to you first, and then we'll open up for questions.
So for the student learning portion, there has been concern. I think the largest concern has been about the possibility of students' mental health and being inundated with work over the break because the semester hasn't ended. And we are making a point to have conversation with our staff so that we understand that there should be no requirement for work due upon return, the day of return from the break. So the intention is not to add work or to have students do studying or work over the break. It will still be considered a break for them. Also for athletics, I spoke with our athletic director, Nicole Edson, about all of the dates that are printed on the calendar, and they all align with what can work for the season. So there is no misalignment for our sporting teams either, in terms of when we were looking at the dates to start either semester or end either semester. I will also mention that we looked at the dates in terms of start and stop, and we did not add additional days to either side. So it's a shift in terms of the week, but there are no added days to either. When I say added, like we didn't make the year any longer than the year always is for student attendance days and or staff attendance days.
Okay, thanks. Questions? Brett?
This gives me great pause and concern, because we're going backwards. This is a situation to have finals after the holiday break that the district had for years and years and years, up until, as now I know, 2012, 13, right? Mm-hmm. School year. So prior to that school year, well, just lost my electricity. Okay. We had finals after the first semester continued past the break, and although I was not on the board at that time, I'm sure there was a robust discussion and there was substantial rationale for moving it before to finish the semester before the winter break. in any event, I just don't think this has been vetted. I don't think it's been in front of the community council where I think it belongs and should be discussed. And that we should get input from our students and our families. This kind of comes as isn't something that we've been looking at for a long time or expecting. It's come up almost immediately, and I just think we need to take a pause and we need to have more discussion, more study. We got some answers this week and comparisons with what other districts do. How are they able to do it? We can't. And take a look at their schedules. I saw that there's even one district that has eliminated finals. It doesn't have finals. What does that look like? So I think this warrants a much longer, probably deeper and longer discussion.
Can I just add to, just in terms of, even without having the actual finals as exams, those days are still counted in school attendance day. So regardless of whether that schedule is for final exams or not, they would still be the same student attendance days. There's 3 days total for that. There's also been the question in what Dr. Johnson asked in terms of the mental health of students and having the break as a break. I noticed also in terms of comments students have given to me in terms of the stress of what December is, as we're trying to wrap everything up neatly before we go into a second semester. There's a lot of rush to get everything in and to get everything finished and to be ready for the final exams that exist. That is causing some stress as well, because when we come back, that semester is over, so there is no doing anything again or coming back. So I do believe there's going to be things on both sides that are going to be pro and cons as you look at either way in terms of which way you go.
Is there any evidence-based data either way for doing finals before break or after break that it truly makes a difference? Because I know, like, for example, Family Ignatius do their finals after the holiday break. And so just understanding I'd be curious whether or not there's I know there's a lot of emotion around it, but I don't know if we have any evidence around better students.
No, I have not seen anything in writing towards it. The biggest concern I've heard is, will they forget everything while they're away for the 2 weeks and come back and take finals? But I have not seen any research that speaks to pros or cons to either way. Again, I think this way is just a matter of how do we make sure that we have some type of balance and care for our kids as we look at the schedule. But I have not seen any research.
And you think we're about 5 days, 6 days difference right now between the currents?
Yes.
It's actually as high as 10.
10. I was about to say,
Right. So, and you mentioned earlier about school starting earlier. So, as an alternative, there were discussions about whether you start school at the beginning of August. People do start school very early. If people really want, and I guess if it's really important to have finals before the holiday, it seems like that's the other option.
Yes. And then keeping in mind too that we had some addition of days off in the first semester that came not last year, but the year before, that we voted into that had an impact on first semester. So it is a choice of continuing to move back into August if that's what we want to do to keep it before December.
I want to just amplify just for a moment, kind of the evidence-based, kind of research-based for this. There is plenty of research out there about the effect of learning loss over summer break, right, from year to year. Winter break, it's hard pressed to look at it to find anything that really makes that really clear for the difference of in high school settings. There is also information about the effects of the pandemic. We will find a lot of research on that, but this exact model compared to others, if there's a study out there somewhere that really drills down on this, I'd welcome anybody to share that. I have not been able to.
And then we are specifically allowed for the time after they come back from the break in January to have some time for revision. So the end of grading period is not until the 2nd week of January. So it's not like we come and then right away, you are away and here are finals. So they have this opportunity to.
I think too, first question, are there opportunities for, for dialogue with parents and students who have concerns about this, or is there anything planned or any kind of forum?
There hasn't been anything planned formally. It doesn't mean it cannot. I have had informal comments with students, like student council, when they had heard of it. Again, their biggest thing was, we're gonna have to work over the break. And then once clearing that up, they were like, oh, okay, like there wasn't more from that, but student council is the only body that was spoken to at this point.
If this helps to make it concrete, I mean, it's good to define like really what we're trying to do here, and I don't think that's necessarily unclear, but to make it even a little more concrete with, let's talk about our civics class, right, which is a semester class that runs both semesters. If I take that class fall semester, I'm gonna have 10 days less, right, according to the schedule we generally have in place, which is 2 weeks of instruction, less than what my counterpart does, who takes that during second semester. In some ways, that becomes a different class. That's a different learning experience. And it's that we're trying to even out. So when a kid graduates from here and they have these different experiences, we're making sure that there's a level of consistency.
And the same is true for driver's education, which has a specific number of hours behind the wheel that students have to have. And it makes it a little bit tighter if students are absent for that experience in the first semester than it does in the second semester, where it's the same required number of hours either way.
Tim?
A comment and a question. My comment really goes to mental wellness. I think, Linda, the concern that's been expressed by parents and students, at least in emails to the board, about work over the break, it's not the fear of being given assignments that are going to be due, on the first day of return. It's more the stress and anxiety that students anticipate, knowing that finals loom in January, right? That they're going to spend the entire 2 weeks of winter break unable to relax and unable to decompress, because they know that in January they've got this big set of tests ahead of them, right? So I just want to acknowledge that it's really not, as was stated, it's a much different concern, maybe a more subjective one and a little harder one for us to address, but I think that's really what people are expressing, and certainly the students that have emailed us, that's how they're articulating it. That issue of mental wellness and lessening the anxiety that our students are experiencing, that's of great importance to us. We talk about this a lot. And so that leads me to my question, which is, it was really interesting to see the response this week as we asked the administration questions. One of the responses was what other high schools in our region have done. And high schools in our region and across the state and across the country, I'm sure, have addressed this issue in part by eliminating final exams. And I'm really curious whether that's a conversation that we are having. And if it's not, then why aren't we?
So that conversation has come up. It is not a conversation that the calendar committee is one that would handle. So it has come up in the student learning arena, and that is a conversation that right now is in that arena to be discussed. But it has come up, it is being discussed as well.
And can I just inquire what kind of timeline we're on for sort of elevating that conversation? It seems to me that we have some learning from the pandemic where we didn't have final exams, or we had very truncated final exams, or a very small part of the final score. It seems to me that we should take that learning and apply it.
I want to thank you for the question. I think it's an important question for us to consider. There is research in the education field about the value of large summative exams like this in a public school setting. Which is to say that large exams aren't valuable in their own right, but the way they traditionally have been handled as final exams is something that is really brought into question. What do they really measure as far as what students understand and do as a result of learning classes? So thank you for the question. I'm not speaking, it's one that I'm very interested in as a superintendent, but it is certainly nothing that, I'm not speaking for the school as a whole. I don't think our school has consensus on this topic. Lori, I asked you to come up, Dr. Frenzy, because I know that you've had some, preliminary conversations about this. You asked about the timeline, and I don't think any sort of real timeline for this has been set. We are in like the kind of initial, I don't know if you want to call it kicking the tires phase of this, but we're exploring that. So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Dr. Ferenza, so you could speak to it a little bit.
So, I don't have a timeline. We have had some very surface level conversations, nothing, super deep. One, because it's about to be finals time, and our teachers are, like our students, stressed and anxious, trying to make sure they get all the instruction in. So it's probably not the time to broach the topic of what should we do. But in some surface level, general, conversations and question asking, many of our teachers are already doing project-based exams. Many of our teachers give opportunities for students to re-demonstrate learning. So it's more of a show me that you now know this, as opposed to not many of our teachers are giving those large summative multiple choice exams. However, our AP teachers do use final exam time to give a practice AP test, which takes the full 90 minutes that we offer for final exams. So in the conversations that you start to have, there is this push-pull, because the AP teachers definitely want to not lose that opportunity to prepare their students. And we have been very successful those teachers have been very successful in preparing our students to score well on their AP exams. And some teachers just feel that the time students put into those performance opportunities is important as well. So I say that to say there is, like Principal Parker said about, the calendar, there is pros and cons. There's people on either side. And so it's going to take a little longer to really delve into what's best for all of our students to come to some consensus as we move forward. But I think probably after final exams and after we start the second semester would be a better time to have this conversation with the teachers.
Thank you for that. I realize you weren't prepared, so I really appreciate the detail. Like Fred, I'm not sure where I come down on this, and but I can tell you, marrying the calendar issue with final exam issue would definitely go a long way for me. So I would love to see us do that. I realize the timing may not work, but that's kind of where I am right now.
Other questions? Is she able?
Think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marianne, please.
Sorry. So just, I think mostly, I'm happy to defer to you all on what's going to work best. And I do want to reiterate what I've been hearing from the community is, I've been hearing very mixed responses. There are people who feel like it's stressful to not have a break. There are people who feel that it's less stressful knowing that you'll have some time to study before the exams. So the parents that I've been seeing and some of the students I've been seeing are divided on that. But the one thing that there is some agreement on is that studying for exams is one thing, but what is onerous is having projects assigned, and that in the past, I'm just noting, in the past that was an issue. And so I would just ask that we make sure the faculty's on board. So that's, and I did try to do a brief journal search to see if I could find any research. I didn't find anything on the 2-week break specifically, as opposed to summer break, but I did find some research that shows that that there's significant drop in exam performance over the course of the day as you get later in the day. And so I would just ask that when you do pick up that finals conversation again, that maybe that should be a part of it, of, rather than having full days of finals, our students may do better if we can find a way to spread it out. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I heard this, I think in the materials we were given, we were told there can be as many as 6 instructional days difference between fall and spring, but then you said sometimes it's 10. So what accounts for that variability?
Different holidays.
Correct.
So like it's, some holidays have been added. Like a few years ago, we made a decision to honor Jewish high holidays. And so, but we only observe them if they fall during the week. So that's why we have some variation. The second piece is elections. So we, in some years, we're required to close for an election day. So it's every other year, and so that contributes as well. And then also like just how the weeks fall, when we're able to start, that comes into it.
Okay. And you mentioned there's some semester-long classes that are requirements, and so a student is getting more instructional days within that class in the spring than the other fall. How many classes fit that definition, or can that be expressed as a percentage of the course catalog? How many classes is that a factor in?
So if we can think about, we have one AP class that is a semester long class. We also have driver's ed civics. Beyond those, in our electives, if we think fine and applied arts, most of those courses are semester courses, as well as our English electives for seniors. And sometimes be semester long.
Yeah, history,
History.
most of our electives.
Seniors.
And I hear you want a percentage,
I would have to count.
we'll have to kind of figure that out, but you know, there are a lot of electives that we offer most.
Absolutely.
So we can dive into that.
A ballpark would just, I mean, how widespread that issue?
Sure.
Okay, so then I've heard several reasons to do this. One is the richness of the experience between the fall. That's one reason I heard. I heard another reason about we don't want to be in school during national holidays. I've also heard we start our year too early. And I've also heard we're not quite in sync as much as we would hope to do with D97. So those are 4 reasons I've heard. What are the biggest, like, where's most of the weight of that? What are the biggest reasons to do this?
Mine is the balance of days for the semester, so that they are evened out and the students are having a similar experience.
So your answer would be the richness answer.
And I just wanted to clarify, we will never be in complete balance with our elementary district, just because they don't have semesters. So they start much later than we do, but that's typically not an issue. An issue is like if one of the districts is closed on a holiday or has a teacher institute day where students are not in attendance, and another one is not, and that's why we have these joint meetings. We try to avoid these situations, and we also make sure that we align our breaks.
And then we also discussed, though it's not written there, like the equity issue of when you take the class or when you're able to take the class based off the richness that's available first or second semester. Or the who gets to take the classes when.
Okay, and so this year we started on August 15th. Is that right?
Yes.
And so if I look at the plan for the revised 2024, it looks like we want to start on the 19th.
Yes, that would be how teaching up there.
So is another reason to do this the desire to just simply start later in August?
No, I mean, it never came up just to try to push it back. I will say for the 26-27 calendar that came up because of Project 2. Because of construction, in case it doesn't end on time, we actually were looking at trying to push it even later so that we would make sure everything was finished. But it was never how do we make it the latest start possible?
Okay.
We ended up counting so that in terms of looking when graduation would rest, that it wasn't pushing graduation to a point where parents would say, my goodness, it's 3 weeks after when we used to.
Okay. Yeah, because you've got the 19th, the 20th, and the 24th is the next 3 years.
Right, and that's the explanation for why the third year is so far down, just the end of project 2.
And just so we understand, they come back. So for example, in 2025 in January, they would come back to school on Monday the 6th.
Yes. Monday the 5th, in 25, 26.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2024, 2025.
Okay, yes, Monday the 6th,
And then you've got hashtag that indicates end of grading period.
correct,
And that would begin finals week.
correct. 15, 16, 17 would be finals.
So maybe just one more statement about how you think this would benefit students.
So again, when I think about what Tim said in terms of the anguish that students are thinking about coming back and thinking about finals over it, the nature of those exams have them that way, whether it's before or after. So right now in our school, the same amount of angst is existing, they're just not waiting for it, but it's coming to it. So I've not seen anyone be calm knowing that the final exams are approaching, no matter where it lies. So I don't believe that once it's in action, that there will be much of a difference in terms of their feelings towards having a end of year project test or summative issue. I've seen it play out in both ways in different districts after January and then here before.
And what you're saying there is the net stress effect is the same.
The net stress effect.
That's a statement about the net stress effect.
Mhm.
What would you say though is the benefit to students?
Again, I'm looking at the richness and allowing teachers to feel as though they have the same amount of time to get through curriculum in both semesters, instead of trying to expedite, to rush and fit everything in, further stressing themselves out and students to get through it in a shorter amount of time in the first semester.
Okay. I appreciate you answering all those questions. I'm super reticent to be reaching into the operations of the school. I think the calendar though is something that is very important and sensitive to families and community. I mean, to the extent that in my prior gig, we actually had a board member present at the calendar committee meetings. And I recognize you'll never reach perfect synchronicity with D97. It's always to the extent possible. But I remember my daughter coming into the high school, and the year just prior, they had changed to this. We finished the first semester in December, and there was tremendous relief amongst kids when you were in the high school, and for my daughter coming in. I'm going to be with Fred and Tim on this, and I'm going to be, you know, really, I guess, needing to get comfortable with this, and I'm really interested in the voice of the student on this. Ultimately, this is to me kind of a true north question. What's in the best interest of students? It's not totally clear that this path is. So I'm going to be kind of need to consider this a lot further.
Okay. My turn. Did you have anything? Most of my questions, I think, have come up in terms of just providing information. The one, as I have a student poll. I have students I have children that were in here during this past transition. So now knowing the year, I have some that were here pre, post, and in the middle. So I'm going to do some market research in talking to my pool of 5. Okay. They also suggested possibly as a suggestion, have we considered moving Christmas? So I'm just trying to make sure we keep all options on the table. No, but what comes to my head as I listen to this is the problem are these 1 semester courses. And you know, you've articulated that well. They represent, and Graham, anytime I want to know what question to write down, he's about 2 steps ahead of me. How big is that? And are those courses that have final exams? Because if those courses don't have final exams, it's like are there some other ways of doing this that says, I mean, because for a full year course, your final exam can be done anytime. It's really a midterm, or so, is that the right word?
Midterm is-
Ah, God, man, I remember some of this. So that one's less critical. It's just, so it seems like the tail is wagging the dog, meaning it's a small section. And, you know, is there a different way that can meet that need, which just says we can balance those without the angst of final, because I do remember that relief of being done. And it's a big mental, you know, I'm done. And so I have been actually this week talking to current students and on this, because I've been working on a project, and the general feeling I get is one of this, you know, initially no, okay, when there's time before, you know, a breather time and no work, the no becomes a maybe, because if it doesn't mean that I'm starting school in, you know, July, other things. So the kind of the hot buttons that we've talked about have come up, which is what work is being required, but also, you know, how much time do I have to kind of check out and then kind of come back and warm up the engine again. So, but the thing that comes to mind is you know, I would like to know what courses are the ones that we're really trying to do this for, which is a list, you know, and are they courses that have exams, or, you know, are there things we could do differently with those courses so that they can be split evenly without kind of a balance, so.
No, but
Yes.
I guess what I heard when they talked about the electives, because I know there are a lot of electives that are in the course catalog, right? So I don't know what percentage there are, but I know there are a lot. And I guess whether you have the exam or not, what is the experience like when you're taking that class? And so even if you don't have an exam, you have a final project, what is my experience of taking said class in semester one because it fits my schedule versus taking it in semester two? But what I'm hearing now is that there's a difference. It could be a difference in that experience because you just have less time. And this is on my mind working for a children's hospital where we're in the midst of RSV season and everybody's sick. I mean, everything's sick. My son's sick right now. So this term, he has less time when he misses school to be able to kind of get himself back on track. So just the reality of that. So for me, I'm thinking what the administration is thinking about what is the experience of the child, no matter what class they're taking when. And can we make sure that that actually is more equal? And I know this is stressing a lot of people about it. I do believe it's important to get some data, get some information, understand. However, I think if you're putting the best interest of the student first, from my view, then we would be focused on how do we make sure that instruction is about equal and the richness of that instruction is about the same, no matter when you take the class or what the end result or project or final is for that class.
I think it's also important to add that while the calendar can be 6 to 10 days different in first semester than second semester, that's just on the actual calendar. But then every time we do an activity, so for example, My Future, My Pathway, when we did set the expectation and it stopped things from happening at a certain time, that's another day that is lost in addition to the 6 to 10. And for whatever reason, it seems that a lot of the interruption happens in first semester. And so every time we ask the teachers, okay, we want to do My Future, My Pathway, I know that they think it's beneficial, but it's another day that they lose instruction and it's frustrating to them. So then we have to make a decision. Do we keep doing My Future, My Pathway, or do we stop doing it because it's taking away another day in first semester? So this was just another thing to consider when we looked at the balancing of first semester and second semester.
Tradition of excellence, the pep assembly for the homecoming time, the winter assembly that's coming up. All of these do something to the bell schedule in the first semester, which also adds to the days and times that teachers are feeling crunched for first semester.
Right.
In this regard, in what we're talking about now, have you taken a critical look at to see if any of those programs can be moved to second semester?
Yes.
I mean, just for example, tradition of excellence, doesn't seem that it's would be mandated to have it in November, that maybe it would work out in April or May.
That's a good question.
Very good question. And some things just fall into the category of legacy, like just in terms of how it's happened. And again, moving anything becomes how we have always imagined it to be, but it's always up for discussion. I cannot move football season, so that pep rally is going to be in the fall.
They did in 2021.
Oh.
And the board really does want a lot of emails from the public.
Yeah. Yes, I cannot move.
Something like making my pathway is positioned for semester because it comes right before students select their courses. So it was intentional if we move it, like we did the very first year to second semester, and kids have already picked their courses, and then learning about all the pathways kind of is a moot point.
The same with set the expectation, which was because of the learning that it is around sexual assault. It was considered in terms of placement, right, a week before homecoming on purpose, so that we were educating before the big dance and time where kids make choices that needs assistance.
Okay. Any other questions?
One more thing, yeah, so, I'm on neither side of this yet, but I just, I think that there is a point to be made that hasn't been made yet, that, I'm just thinking of myself as having undiagnosed ADHD at the time, that I always really struggled with exams, because I didn't have enough time to study for them. And so I do think there is a valid point to be made that for those students that could use a little more time to study for the midterms and the finals, this does give them that, potentially. And it also would give very, very busy, the very busy student body and the athletes and so on, a nice chunk of time to prepare for those big exams as well. I just think it's worth pointing out that that's something to consider.
Tim, one more question. It was requested during this week that any past board docs or agendas or if there's any materials relating to the change 12, 15 years ago when we switched to Congress. I think that we could put it in this, you can share that with us. That'd be great.
You actually, get a paper copy that's actually at your table somewhere around here, it should be there. There is, not a whole lot of information in the minutes nor the original agenda, but you can trace kind of that conversation about the.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And thanks for this feedback, conversation. I think it's an important one. Our team's gonna go back and take a look at this and we'll, we'll figure out next steps before we bring it back to the work. Okay.
Thank you.
I was frightened as a parent. Okay. We move to, we're gonna keep going. We move to our finance section. Like, once I can get my computer, calendar on. So. Our first topic is the property casualty and workers' comp insurance RFP.
All right, this is annual approval of property casualty and workers' compensation RFP and for insurance, and it is in compliance with priority 4, our strategic plan. It's now 460, and I turn it over to Mr. Arbogast to introduce it for the board's discussion.
Sure. In 2020, the district had moved away from working with a cooperative insurance group to going out and going to a broker to get our insurance. Through that RFP process, Mesro Financial or Mesro Insurance Group was selected During that period of time, Alliant purchased Metro, so that's why you're seeing a different name here. But the service has been incredibly strong. When we have claims, they're very responsive, collaborative. They work with us on concerns that we have, and have proven to also, through our investigation into the OSIP insurance for the Project 2, have a strong background in that. In speaking with the senior VP at Alliant and our account executive, they have proposed a very reasonable 2-year extension for the district. And we are recommending that we retain their services and approve the 2-year extension.
And my apologies, as I introduced this, I said annual. It's not, of course, it's.
Questions from the board? Right?
Not so much questions, but comments. I think that we almost have to go forward with Alliant because of the situation with the OSIP that we decided we wanted to go with. I mean, you can't really change brokers in the middle of that stream because of the services that they have to provide. I think looking at from someone who has the background in this industry, I think they've done a very good job for us. The one thing I would like to see more of is, and they may be doing it and we don't know it, but reporting on in terms of the risk management issues that are occurring. How is there a risk management plan out there? What it looks like and how our losses trend. Just a big picture of where we stand in terms of loss experience. Because we really don't. That kind of reporting really has never come to the board.
Okay.
And I think we need to see that maybe once a year.
Sure, we can work with Alliant to bring that out.
Right. And whatever you may have in terms of if I'm assuming there's a safety committee that meets with them or the insurance company representatives regularly. And what those agendas look like, what of the big picture items are, in terms of is there safety training going on and what that may look like for, this school year, what items, is there going to be in December? Do you train on, ice and snow and slips and falls and those kinds of things?
Yep, we can put all that together for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we may move to our next topic, which is facility availability during breaks. This was an item brought forth as new business to be put on the agenda, so it is now on our agenda for discussion.
Yeah, I don't have much by way of introduction for this, other than the fact that when we discussed this as a future agenda item, it was suggested, not initially, but just a few weeks ago, it was suggested that we bring it back to gain some clarity on what exactly is I think the why is how it was defined, what exactly is the goal, what exactly is being asked. And so that's why to gain that, and then depending on this conversation, it's the intent of our admin team to gather this and then go back and do some work before we bring something back, to the board. So there we go.
Yeah, I guess I'll start out because this is my kind of recommendation. I believe that the closure of our building during the course of the school year is done so in a convenience for other than what's in the best interest of our students. I believe that it's closed, and we've been told before, to allow certain employee groups to have time off, vacations or whatever. But I don't think that works in the interest of our students. And I can give some examples, and I'll give you a very fresh example of over Thanksgiving, the building was closed. There was no access. The only access was allowed to the main entrance. Right, sports teams, and if there were activities that needed to use the building, you had to go through the main entrance. But I can tell you that for the program that I'm involved with, we had on Friday, we had a 2 o'clock practice schedule. There was no one to let us in the building. There is nobody sitting at the desk, at the welcome center. Ring the bell, nobody answered. And this is a problem, and this has become more and more acute and problematic over the years. I looked. You did give us a schedule of days that the buildings are closed. I'm not sure the difference in definition between building closed and district closed. So that may make a difference. However, we're closed throughout our holiday periods, which means that between the last day of the first semester and the first day of the second semester, there's no events being hosted. There's no intramural programming going on for our kids to come into the building. And I just think that's wrong. I just don't think we're looking at what's in the best interest of our students. You can go, our athletic teams are going and competing elsewhere during that time. So we know that there are other school buildings and districts that are open. And for us not to be able to utilize our facility, I just think is wrong. We're going to invest $102 million, and we're going to talk about that very shortly, into a new facility, and then we're not going to utilize it. We're not going to open it. We're not going to have swim meets and volleyball camps or whatever you might do during that time period. And I think we're accommodating. I honestly think we're just accommodating the wrong cohort of people here. And that's why I brought this up. I counted 28 days during the school year of the building being closed, and it's a whole month of closure. And this is the greatest asset that our community has, and I think we need to utilize it, and we need to allow our kids to utilize it. I could think of a million things to do on Friday after Thanksgiving, whether it be a floor hockey tournament or a basketball tournament or an intramural swim meet. There's tons of things, or wheel throwing demonstrations, tons of things that could involve our students that may not specifically be academic, right? but could certainly be a learning experience. And that's why I brought this up.
Let me answer some questions there. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Do you mind if I add
No.
to that before
No.
you do? Just because I agree with everything that Fred said, but I want to put an additional gloss on it. That's from a facility standpoint. We've already spent tens of millions of dollars to create a student commons, a welcoming center, a student commons, and we did that in large part because our kids told us they want to be here. They want to be here before school. They want to be here after school, and I would bet a lot of money they would love to be here the day after Thanksgiving. They would love to be here all during winter break, not every day, but a lot of kids would love to be here. They don't want to be at home, but they need a place to be. They need a place to hang out with friends. They need things to do. Our community has already invested in this, and I think we have an obligation to maximize the return on that investment, especially when our kids have already told us that this is what they want. I don't think that no one would suggest that that we would require a lot of employees to be here where there's no point in fighting that fight. But I would bet money that we have any number of faculty and staff that would raise their hand and say, yeah, you want me to come in for one day during winter break? Sign me up, because I'm happy to get out of my house. Or 2 days, or if you want to pay me, I'm happy to be there for a week. And I think that we can also be creative in how many days we are open. If it's not possible to be open for every single one of those days, then let's think about what we can do, right? Maybe both Wednesdays during winter break, we open the student commons up for cocoa and cookies, and we have staff there to supervise that, and it's just a hangout for our kids for 2 days during winter break. Maybe some of those days that's the 3-on-3 basketball tournament we've been talking about. And we have an intramural aspect. We do have supervision, and we have activities that are guided by staff. The sky's the limit, and I know that we can be creative about this, and I don't think that it's going to be very much cost. I don't think it's going to be onerous in terms of an ask to staff. So that's where I'm coming from.
Can I just add on real quick too?
You know what?
Oh, go
ahead, Anna. No, both Fred and Tim bring up good points. I have to go back to my business hat. Whenever you're gonna have facilities open for an extended period of time, there is a cost to it. And what it would take to staff and what it would take to run it and what you need to do, I think teachers would be happy to come in if they got paid. But I don't know how many, how we would have, I just don't know what the cost would be. So I'd be interested in understanding based on what activities you would do, what kind of programming, what would that cost? Where would that money come from? What do you deprioritize to actually make this a priority? And how do you balance out, without going over budget, being able to do something like this? So that's where my only concern. I don't disagree with what you both said. I think it would be wonderful to use this building, but the reality is it's not free to use it. And as someone who does a lot of staffing, it's money to actually staff places and staff buildings. And so that has to be a consideration. And I don't want to do it at the expense of something else that we've already said is important for our budget that we built into our budget. And I don't want to go over budget. So that's where I am with this.
Yeah, just real quick. So I agree with what was said, Fred and Tim. I also agree that it's important that we look at the budgetary from the budgetary vantage point as well. But I also think that we need to take into consideration that the part of our student body that relies on beyond the community here, and for not just the community, but sometimes it's safety, sometimes sometimes it's also 2 meals in a day, and I think that merits consideration as well. So thinking about that aspect has merit.
I need clarity on that point. Sorry.
I mean,
students during these times, is that what you're proposing as well?
I think that there's merit to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure. I'll jump in. I love the idea of utilizing our facilities to the fullest. I share the frustration, I think, of having buildings that, are sitting empty when kids could use them. So if there are ways to do it, even in a brief kind of way, add a day or two to break, that's feasible. I love the idea. My concern, in addition to the budgetary concern, is it's not, if it was like a preschool or something like that, where you could just ask for one volunteer teacher to come in and cover, or pay somebody, that's one thing, right? But the scale of the school, I just feel like it would, I guess I would want admin to come back and tell us, let's say we're adding, this Wednesday hot chocolate day, whatever, that we're going to be open, or let's say we're going to add, the gyms will be available. What does that actually mean in terms of required staffing? Because it's not just, I think, the people who are directly supervising the kids. Presumably you also need to have security on on the grounds, you have to have janitorial, maybe you have to have kitchen staff, and you presumably need some of the higher level admin people in case there's an incident that requires a fast response. So I'd, like, then do they not get a break over the break, or do we have some plan for, bringing in a retired person to sub as admin? I don't know, that it just seems a little unwieldy. But which is not to say, I'm not saying we can't do it, but I'd like to know what the factors are going into it. Thanks.
I have three notes. One is, I'd like to understand, Fred, what are other districts doing? I mean, are we the only ones that, not that would be a point. And the second piece is, sitting on some of these other forums, I keep hearing about the swell of people at our new community resource center that just opened. Okay, so the park district has invested, and have we, spoken to them and just to understand, are those students, are those individuals that, given the choice, would come here, but they're going there? So it would be interesting to understand, because there's been a lot of communication on that. So those are the kind of two outside views that I would throw. And then I agree with some of the comments on the resource side. Sometimes when you have an issue like this, it's like, okay, it's going to cost you $1 billion because we're going to, I think it needs to be very targeted of what we can do so that we don't, have the full school staffed when we want a group of 10 kids to be able to play in the gym. But at the same time, we've got to respect the safety requirements, et cetera. So it is a targeted ask, and that's it. And now you may. Yep.
Great. Thank you for this conversation. This adds clarity to the request, much needed clarity to the request. And I just want to just briefly summarize this back, because this is what we're going to go and work on. So there was first really a targeted ask, but I heard it wasn't exclusively, Fred, what you said, but it is for existing programs. It is for known programs that might work in the summer: basketball, wrestling, intramurals, things like that. That's one component of this. A separate component of this is like an open school, right? Where folks can come in and feel, that this is a welcome place to be, right, during their breaks. There might be food or other things associated with that, but that's different than a targeted specific program.
Right, well, I would say
I appreciate
the current programs that are being run and the way that they're being handled, all right, how do I say this? The respect that's been given those programs is diminished as the building has become more and more closed.
Okay, sure.
Okay, for kids having to run around to find an entrance to get into the building, to get to their practice, is just wrong. And that's one issue. The other issue would be the expansion into other programming that could be available.
Absolutely, that's a clarity that I appreciate. So there's kind of that hanging fruit, right, for the first part of this, and then there's the others. The comparative information that you shared, Tom, I think is really helpful. And then of course there's the cost, benefit analysis of this, and literally the cost, in the capital and the actual capital. Just one thing that hasn't been named that's baked into that cost is what, and this is an answer to a question you asked, what we're able to get done from a building maintenance and perspective time during these downtimes, which isn't to say that we need as many days as we currently have to get those things done. I'm not proposing that, but there is a benefit to have the building completely shut down, which is the building closed definition that you mentioned earlier. So when the building is closed, it's not open for activities or things like that, but we will have some staff here. buildings and grounds or whomever doing their work, maintenance, whatever they have to do. When it says district is closed, the building is shut down, right? There's nothing going on that school day at all. So, well, this is good feedback. We'll take this and we'll package something else. I don't know exactly when we're going to bring this back for the board for discussion, but we will bring something back. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And now. Project Dose.
So we brought up all of these previous topics to warm up the board for deep engagement in project 2. And so we have our folks from FGM here, Michael Becker and Allison Sternquist, Tony Arbogast, and we have a PDF here attached. So Ed, if you could.
Oh, he's gonna share his screen.
Like I said, Becker, if you could share your screen, that'd be great. And we'll go ahead and get started. It probably comes as no surprise that this is aligned to priority 4 of our strategic plan and district policies 415 460. So I'm going to start off this conversation here myself, actually. Okay. Let's just dive right in. So if we could go to the next slide here, this may be a little hard to read. I'm going to cover the first 2 slides before I turn it over to FGM. It has been a process that has gotten us to this point. That's a statement that I think is obvious to all. And I just want to march us through that process a little bit so we're all on the same page about where we are right now. The board knows that, back in March, we presented to the board the schematic design for Project 2. It was that design that set this $102 million estimated cost for the project that drove our funding conversations as a district. And we used that after that funding was approved by the board to dive into the process that immediately followed that, which was the design development process. And it was through the completion of that a second estimate was completed earlier this fall. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that process unfolded. We did a schematic design, which is a high level, a little bit more developed, I should say, in many ways, a lot more developed than the initial high level estimate that we had kind of developed through the Imagine process. Enough certainly to give a quality estimate to help us drive our funding conversations, but certainly lacking in the detail that we need to understand really what we want in this project. There were a whole slew of other conversations that FGM and our administrative team had with various stakeholders within this building, students and others, to help really flesh out this design development process that concluded earlier this fall. And as is not a surprise, it happens in a lot of other processes when you do things like this. When you go back and you say a project is funded, then you have conversations about what might this look like here? What could we do in this space? What might happen here? We start to think to ourselves, ooh, you know what? There's a little bit of room here. We can plug this in. Or, wouldn't it be nice in the pool if we didn't have any beams holding up the roof and the ceiling? What if we had a huge steel truss that allowed completely perfect unobstructed views? Those types of things entered the conversation pretty easily. Then we finished that design process. We kicked it over to our estimators. We got in our contract with Gilbane. Thank you, Gilbane. And they estimated where we were at that process. And I think the simplest way to say where we were, the situation we had there is we found that our eyes got a little bit too big for our stomachs. And so the first estimate that came back to us after all that process was $123 million. Certainly not a way that we were going to end. We had to go back, re-examine this process and make sure this was going to fit within the budget that the board had set, holding true to the scope that we had committed to throughout this process. And that took a lot of work. There were a lot of conversations we had with everybody involved in this process internally to make sure that we got back to kind of our true north for the project. And that's what you are going to see in front of you in what we have in front of us. So where are we right now in this process? We finished the 50% construction documents. That is a process where we really have been able to define what is in this project. And we are in the steps of, and you guys actually can do a better job of explaining what 50% and 90% is in all this. But we are ready to go now to another kind of really refined estimating process that we will bring back to the board with a little bit more specifics about costs for various elements of this 2 weeks from today. Our purpose for today's conversation is not to come to a vote. It is to make sure that we are kind of setting the table with what we're really talking about with Project 2 as we really, really refine that cost. There'll be a little bit more conversation about it a little bit, but we are confident to say that what we're bringing to you and what we will bring to you is something right within that 102. Okay, right within that 102 promised cost. That's our commitment at this point, and we've gone enough along the process to be able to make that commitment confident. So we're going to be doing that on the board in December, talking about that with a little more specificity, and then when we come back to the board January 11th, we are going to present what is the control estimate that will allow us to then go out to bid and actually begin securing the subcontractors and everything we need to begin this project. And that the timeline there for construction and demolition is all the same, June 2024 through August of 2026. I want to draw our attention into this next table on the next slide. And I bet folks sitting in the bleachers out there, any questions? It's kind of small, but what you see here is a table that helps chart the evolution of scope from the original management process that concluded in December of 2018 through the schematic design process I previously mentioned that we talked about in March of 23 to the kind of eyes bigger than our stomachs design development presentation that we gave in August of 23, and now what we're referring to as the base bid. And from a very high level, I'm going to draw your attention to the areas in that base bid that, I mean, you can chart this. I'm not going to go line by line. You can see basically how kind of things have remained even Steven. But you see areas where we've had to go back and said, no, we really had things that were originally part of Project 3, and they need to stay as part of Project 3. There isn't quite room for them as we currently have them in Project 2. And the one element that sticks within that is the team room. We had thought during the design development phase that we were going to be able to add an additional team room as an athletic space for our team program in special ed. It was originally slated for Project 3. We were trying to squeeze it in here in Project 2. It just simply doesn't work no matter what we do with it. Later on, I'm going to turn this over to Becker in a second to talk through these spaces. But later on in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about add alternates. And I want to describe what we mean by those. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. They aren't add alternates. We're going to talk about how we want to implement alternates with this project. And the one that is programming space is related to the trainer space, okay? And that is one that if we have a good bid day and the bids come in beneath our 102 amount, there are things we want to put in here to make sure that our scope really serves our student needs as originally identified. So I'm not exactly sure how incredibly clear that all was, but hopefully this table serves as a good kind of check for the board as they're taking a look at the progress over time. I am going to draw your attention to one thing at the bottom of this for right now. If you look at the bottom, you see some miscellaneous spaces. Okay, there's a category called miscellaneous. You can see that none of those miscellaneous spaces were originally part of the Imagine process. All of them were included in the schematic design process. All of them were part of the design development process. 2 of them now have been removed as we talk about our base bid. And what we're talking about is number 1, the additional 4th floor footprint. And we expanded that. We realized that it just wasn't cost effective for us to keep that 4th floor footprint as usable student space as part of Project 2. Secondly, we had talked about the South Hallway renovation. As we do Project 2, before we do Project 3, we talked about refinishing that whole athletic hallway so that it kind of matches the design of it in Project 2. That is something that was somewhat underestimated in the schematic design process, something that we feel is best deferred either to something that we can handle through maintenance or something that we will make part of project 3 after that complete part of the building has been renovated. So that has been removed for the base bid that you see here. With those exceptions, what we see here is a solid match for what we have from the schematic design process with the board. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I'm going to turn it over to Becker to take a look at what these spaces actually look like.
Okay, Becker next, but I want to just talk through as we start, now that Greg's kind of gone over what the scope was, the scope process and the estimating process. We really wanted to share tonight as part of that before we get into in 2 weeks, the financial discussions. What does the building look like now? Where do we stand right now after this entire process? To some extent, show that the design intent has been retained, that there's not a significant reduction in quality of what is being received. It's just like Greg said, there's not a significant adjustment to scope. So we previously with design development shared some of the exterior elevations, and you can see through these that they essentially, it's the same building for the most part here. So, and then getting into the floor plans, I want to just talk through very high level briefly, you know, what's it in each the scope for the various floor levels. And so here you can see at the last design development presentation, we talked through what is the nature of the first floor and that main public space, and this really is unchanged. You can see the main entry here along that south corridor. As the first thing when you walk in, you'll see there's the donor wall, which will celebrate everyone that is giving to make this project happen. And Mike Becker will share some of what that may start to look like. And then we also have that curated history display celebrating the history of OPRF, which is very much about the design of this area and ties into the way we celebrated the history with Project 1. This is celebrating history in this area. And again, we still have that intimidation corridor that we had spoken about in design development. You can start to see what that will look like in the image on the bottom right hand, and on the upper right hand is the beginnings of, you'll see what the history display will look like, and Mike Becker will speak to that in a little bit. So at the first floor entry area, you'll see as you come in, the weight room is essentially unchanged. That's here at this level along, and the main commons and concessions area is at this level on the weight room, the pool, deck level here, and then the aquatic support spaces and locker rooms, which is unchanged from what it was at design development. Greg has spoken to there being some alternates. And so one of the things that we're putting out here as an alternate, the base bid, is as you've seen the larger floor plan, as an alternate, we're going to get pricing for what it would be to retain that feature there, which was connecting the first floor and second floor commons areas to assist in circulation, but also bring an elevated sense of space. So that is something that the board will have pricing on after bids and would be able to make a decision on whether or not to spend the money on that. So at the west pool area, as the base bid will be to have the pool area set up to be able to accommodate 2 wrestling mats, and it would also be intended to be used as a multi-purpose space, the way the administration envisions this, that it could be used for some adaptive PE programming during the day. And also there would be batting cage nets that would have a finer netting that could be used for the golf team as well. So there's a number of purposes and uses to this space that limits the investment into this space, but maximizes the use of it, because this is a space that will be sacrificed several years down the road when Project 3 is built. Yeah.
Where was this space?
This is the West Pool window.
The West Pool.
At the first one, yeah. And so in the red box that you see to the right of that is the scope alternate that Greg had spoken about prior to this, which would be to do a minimal amount of repurposing to utilize this existing locker room to basically make it usable as an additional space for the trainers program in the interim between Project 2 and Project 3. And again, that is something that the board would get pricing information on and be able to make a decision upon whether or not to spend that money. So as we, in the basement area, this area is essentially unchanged. There's one electrical room with some of the changes we made up at the fourth floor, an electrical room that had been built out over the existing building, needed to come down within the existing building footprint. And you can see that below the purple of the green room, the theater green room. It did not reduce any program or space for the theater department. We just rearranged how those spaces were laid out to accommodate that shift. Another, one of the things that we did in the budget alignment process was to kind of reconfigure our locker rooms to get the most efficiency out of them. And so these spaces were reconfigured and rethought, but we still have provided the same amount of lockers and accommodation for students. It just was reconfigured to be as cost efficient as we could possibly get. At the second floor, this is where, again, that alternate for the future stair. The base bid would not have that connecting stair, but you can see down in the bottom right-hand corner what that space would look like should that alternate be accepted. Right now, we have 408 seats available in the observation gallery, which is unchanged from design development. And one of the changes at this floor is that previously in design development, the yoga and self-defense space had been up at the fourth floor. And that space was brought down here to the second floor, and it's actually in a right along the exterior wall next to the one classroom down here. And that space actually is getting direct natural light as opposed to being across the hall from the exterior wall. So it's actually a much nicer space for them. Office spaces that had been along that wall during design development have been pulled into the interior, prioritizing student access to exterior natural light. Otherwise, this floor, those are the main changes at this floor level. Moving up to the third floor, the dance studio is up here next to the three-court gym. And this change, this was already incorporated during the DE presentation, and this location was utilized in order to maximize the clear height available to our the dance program. And the only other real change at this floor is that the PE faculty offices are all located at the upper left hand with a minor adjustment at this floor. The main change, as Greg had noted earlier, is at the fourth floor. So previously we had been building out over the existing building with some of the mechanical room and providing yoga and self-defense up at this level. There was literally millions of dollars in savings to pull that off of the existing building and fit the mechanical room fully within the footprint of the addition, which moved that yoga and self-defense space down to the second floor where I just mentioned. And as Greg indicated, you can see now there's that low roof area is shown now that had previously been enclosed space, with that space being something that would be sacrificed when Project 5 happens, and with the cost savings to this going back to being a low roof, that is where this landed. And the potential of wrestling being in this area has been accommodated by placing that programming over in the West Pool area. So then next floor, oh shoot, I'm gonna go too far now. The roof plan here, and that's going too far, sorry. So the roof plan is essentially, we are still, the main point to hit on here is that we still have a green roof, and we are still accommodating for future PV array. We do have, with the low roof, we were actually able to make the costly equipment screening to prevent noise, because that's taken care of by the being in the low roof area. So, and then just touching on a sustainable design update, previously we had provided and showed that we are on track for 52 credits with a potential, we had shown a potential of 43 additional possible credits that were not fully determined what would be feasible. We won't know for sure until we get into the construction process and submitting to LEED exactly how those will pan out, but we have broken it down a little bit further to show in the blue column are the potential, the maybe items and credits and that we think have a higher likelihood there's a high likelihood that we could achieve those. And then the yellow are ones that are probably less likely. So when you put together the 52 green and the 13 in the blue column, that if we achieved all of that, that would get us to 65 points, which would be a LEED Gold building. So not a certainty until we get into the design process and get feedback and from the USGBC, but it is definitely still within target. So. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Becker to just share the pretty pictures.
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of updates since we last showed some of these images. There's a lot of materiality and a lot of detail that has been developed. You'll see a lot more color, a lot more school spirit, a lot more final finishes in most of these images. So this is the first floor commons. On the image on the left, way back at the end of the image, that's the main entry. So that's as you walk in. And then the display case you see on the left there is that historical display. So that will be curated and designed in a way to really showcase the history of OPRF and the athletics and whatever else might be within that display case. And then we're bringing in some of the materiality that ties in the project one areas, as we had mentioned before, but now with more pops of that color, more of that school spirit. You'll see the orange soffits being introduced to highlight that history display case. That's also something that catches your eye as you walk in from the main entry or as you're walking from the other corridor spaces. There's a curiosity element there of what is that orange element sticking out, drawing you into that space. You'll see that space is nice and open and large. We have a large circulation corridors, large commons to accommodate gatherings and accommodate flow through that space. And then on the end of that image, actually all three images, you'll see the blue wall. That's the concessions area there. And then beyond that would be your entrance into the pool area. So the upper right image is another view of that common space, but the base bid image. So that image does not include the communication stair that would connect the first and second floor spaces. And then the bottom image is an image showing if that stair were to be put in, that's the alternate. So that would be a separate bid piece that, if accepted, could be installed and put in, and we're doing all the detailing to accommodate that going in. The colorful piece that you see in the image there is an art display. It's really the a feature piece of the commons, and that is something that we'll continue to work with the district on developing and designing that space there, that piece there. And then as part of the alternate, that piece could extend up and be a two-story piece that extends through that open volume there.
Yeah, can I just clarify just for a second for anybody listening at home or for folks in the room who have questions about this? That's not what we're saying that our design is going to look like. That's a placeholder image, right? No, there's been no work on that specific image as far as the school is concerned.
Thank you, exactly. That is a placeholder within the rendering next. So moving our way up to the second floor. So this is the second floor common space. On the left there is the main common space, looking into the entrance to the pool balcony. Very transparent, very open. We wanted these spaces to feel very bright, very welcoming. A lot of transparency, so you can see through these spaces, into these spaces, you know, that curiosity of walking by and seeing what's happening. On the left part of the left image, you'll see the white wall with the speckled tile. That is a feature. Well, you see it in the upper right image as well. That is a feature wall at this common space. We're using a fun material there and accommodating some salvaged tiles from the east pool. It's another piece of displaying that history of OPRF and incorporating some salvaged elements from the existing building that's going to be torn down into the new building.
And examples of those tiles can be seen right on the back wall back here. It'd be ones that we are able to salvage out of West Pool, similar to these.
And I didn't mention on the first floor, we had talked a while ago about salvaging some of the statue figures that are within the east pool embedded in the wall. That is still being accommodated as part of the history display piece. So those are more ways we can accommodate salvaging these feature pieces of the existing building and tying them into the new building design. And then on the upper right and bottom right image, those are other views of the commons. There's a display case, a main display case on this floor, on this commons as well. And then the upper right image shows without the stair, and the bottom right image shows with that stair if it were to be incorporated. And then this is the third floor. So we've worked our way up through the 3-floor common spaces. This is the 3rd floor common spaces. This is a long, large commons that extends along the entryways into the main 3-court gymnasium. There's 2 large display cases there for trophies or whatever else were to be displayed. Again, at all 3 floors for some continuity, you'll see that orange soffit highlighting those display cases and bringing in that pop of OPRF color and branding to these spaces. At the far end in the right image, it's hard to see, but there's a feature wall for this commons as well that incorporates a husky head image on the wall, but also salvaged gym flooring from the existing building. So at the donor wall, we didn't quite see an image of it, but we're looking to salvage the wood flooring as a backdrop for the donor wall, as well as this feature wall here. Again, harvesting those existing building elements from the existing building and utilizing them to create these feature pieces within the project. And then the blue wall is another concessions area for this floor. And then there's also a video wall on this floor that would be similar to the one at the Welcome Center for displaying messages and things like that for this common space. And then we'll go through some of the individual spaces. So these are the performing arts spaces. On the upper left would be the renovated green room, bringing in some of that branding element and those colors there, and just renovating that space entirely, new ceilings, new mirrors, new AV equipment, new furniture, things like that. On the bottom left would be another view of that green room being renovated. And then on the right side upper right is one of the dressing rooms. That's the larger of the dressing rooms of the 3 dressing rooms we're providing. And then on the bottom right would be the scene shop and the prop shop, or the costume shop and the prop shop. Here are 2 views of the pool. On the left would be a pool view from the pool deck looking up towards the balcony. And on the right would be a view from the balcony looking down into the pool. A lot of natural light, a lot of transparency, keeping that space nice and bright, but also implementing the pops of the blue and the orange that we started to see throughout these spaces. And then banners and scoreboards and things like that would be provided as well. Here's a view of the 3-court gym, very similar to the other spaces. Having that branding element, you'll see the feature wall in the back, that 3 huskies, a lot of blue, a lot of orange, adding a little bit of that intimidation factor and that branding element to this space. We're standing in the main competition court area, and then there you'll see the curtain wall, the ribbon window, a lot of natural light, a lot of transparency. That was something that was lacking in the spaces now that we heard that we really needed to improve, and that's what we try to do for all these spaces. And here we have, we do get an image of the donor wall here. So this is the weight room, but on the left we're outside the weight room actually. We're looking at the main entry. On the left, you'll see that donor wall display where we have some pops of that blue and orange, but the main piece is that salvaged wood portion that you'll see, that lighter yellower color. And then on there would be the plaques, various sizes and layouts, depending on what the final design becomes for the various owners. And then we're looking through the glass window into the weight room, and then on the right, you can see a final view within the weight room where we have the turf inlay, we have all the equipment being located with all the new flooring and new systems, new connections and things, everything needed throughout the weight room that was asked of during programming. And then here a view of the dance studio on the left, and then now the yoga and self-defense room on the right, where now you can see being along an exterior wall, there's windows and connections to outdoor. And all these spaces that would be these like teaching spaces are equipped with everything necessary for teaching and short term projectors and things like that.
So, and within the yoga and self-defense studio, the flooring being provided in there is such that it's got some extra cushion that will allow it to be a flex space that while it's not ideally designed with the same type of flooring as the dance studio, it can be a flex space for those programs that it could accommodate with that better flooring in there to be a flexible use space for them after school. So then coming back to the alternates that had been spoken about previously, Greg, do you want to speak to the program space one for the trainer space, and then I can speak to some of the more technical ones.
Yeah, we've really already hit this page shows kind of the preferred sequence, the recommended sequence for alternates that we came to through consensus as we were going through it. And the first one is the first one because it's student programming space. It allows us to repurpose a locker room that is directly under the center of the bleachers that are in the field house. This is the locker room that is directly behind where the current trainer's room is, right? For those of you who are familiar with that. And the idea is to do a base kind of repurpose of that space, gutting it out, removing the lockers, doing enough work to make it compliant and to make it functional for an expanded trainer space. This allows us, if we are able to do this, if we again have a bid day that allows it, the idea is that it completes our programming requests, allowing that west pool infill to be used for the wrestling and the batting cages and the golf, the inside golf range that we couldn't do otherwise. So that's the logic behind this. But again, this is space that's temporary. This is space that with the completion of project 3, whenever that may be, would be completely removed and redesigned. And now after this, you have the non-programming spaces that we prioritize as well.
And so these items are ones that, as you went through the budget alignment process, that the district and the entire team did not feel belong in the base set, the base bid, but that shouldn't be taken off the table. That they were, if there was the opportunity, we would bring these items back in. So at the pool deck and the aquatic areas and in the locker rooms right now, there's a concrete finish, a room finish, non-slip finish concrete that is in the base bid. Epoxy flooring, if you go into the toilet rooms and the public toilet rooms that were part of Project 1, that's the flooring that we're talking about for epoxy flooring that would be this add. And so in order of preference would be to add that back into the pool deck, which is the public and obviously the wettest area to bring that back in. And then the next step would be to go into the locker room wet areas such as the toilet rooms and shower rooms to provide that there. And then potentially also the rest of the aquatic support spaces. So that would be an add that if there's the opportunity that the district would like to move forward with. We spoke to the feature stair. It's a circulation improvement plus an aesthetic higher level design item that the board could determine whether or not the value was there to add that back in. And then when it comes to roofing, basically where we are at right now is the base roofing material has a 25-year warranty, and it's kind of like the Chevy. Derby gum would be the Cadillac, which is Derby gum is what the district has installed on all of their new roofs other than at the South Cafeteria and SRC. The choice was made to make some savings to go with PVC, which still has a 30-year warranty. It's just not quite the Cadillac. So it's kind of the in between the 25-year TPO and the higher level Derby gum. So those are items that we're putting out there that you'll get pricing on each of those to determine if it's worth doing those upgrades. So with that, there's also the updated chart just shows what the scope would look like if the trainer's alternate was proceeded with. So when it comes to next steps on December 21st, as Greg mentioned, the 90% construction document estimate would be brought forward. And so really, this is where we're at. Everything other than the really nitty-gritty construction details that we're working on would be baked into this set of the estimate that's coming forward to you. And then at the January 11th committee of the whole, the intent is to go out to bid the week after that, but assuming that the board votes to confirm that budget that's brought forward from Gilbane, approve the control estimate, we would go out to bid in January. In the January meetings, our understanding is that the geothermal plan will be presented to the board for discussion. So obviously that begs the question, well, if we've designed and gone out to bid with geothermal designed, and what if the board chooses not to do geothermal? Our understanding is that at the January 25th board meeting, after discussion at the committee of the whole, that the geothermal plan would be voted on. If for some, we will be out to bid at that time, but if the board chooses not to move forward with geothermal, we've already worked out a plan for how to address this, in which case the mechanical bids, which are impacted by that, would be pulled off the street. The bidders would be allowed shared that this decision changed, and that they would go back out on the street on March 1st. And then you would be voting on those in April when the bids were open for the mechanical. So it would delay the mechanical bids, and we would just make some adjustments via what's called addendum to other bid packages that may be impacted by that. So we do have a plan, knowing that there is some uncertainty on this, but that allows us to go out to bid in January to meet kind of some of the lead times and schedule needs necessary to be done with the project in the summer of 2026. So that's what you can see here. I'm great for anything else you want to add to that.
You covered it. I'm ready for questions, I think.
All right.
No questions? All right, next agenda.
Oh. Presentation was so good that when I read it, it absorbed most of this. Oh, that's great. Great job, and thank you for numbering those slides.
Okay. My apologies on stuff. I had no emergency at home, and so I apologize for stuff.
Right.
Yeah, well, let me preface my comments with on time, on budget, safely. Okay, that's our thing. I kind of feel like Ralphie in the Christmas story, waking up in the morning and getting a squirt gun instead of his promised Red Ryder BB gun. I feel that what was presented to us in August, all right, was unrealistic. All right, it could not have been anywhere near what our budget was, and I'm very upset that that there's been so much change. All right, we're losing 13,000 square feet. Okay, the additional square footage I think was a huge addition. Was very important. What we were given in March should have equated to $102 million. However, we've lost 12 seats in our pool balcony. We've lost our training facility. We've lost a classroom, and we've lost the fourth floor shelf space. Or shell space, which then later on turned into the wrestling space. And I expected at a minimum today to be able to see all of those things in this base bid. And I really feel like we've been let down. One question I would like to know is, in one of my concerns is that if we're going to lose the fourth floor space, whatever it's going to be used for, whether it's a shell, storage, or a wrestling space or a dance space, all right, I'd like to know specifically the numbers, the costs, and is it possible, and what the cost would be for a preparation of that site, that portion of the construction to maybe be added in a future time. We know that our garage was designed in a way that we can add another story to it. So I'd like to know what it would take and why we can't just build this shell and what that cost is. I'll say this, that anytime I hear something like a feature, all right, I go to grab my pocketbook, my wallet, all right, because that means money. All right, a feature stair, I don't think we ever asked for. I think it can go, the feature stair should be to our basement. So I just think that we are looking for the heavy duty Chevy, not the Cadillac. We're looking to have a space that will last a very long time. And all of the extras, all right, that can be added on later, whether it's design, whether it's interior design, whether it's decoration, whatever, those always can be added on later. The actual structure itself is what's most important. And if we can build and recoup that 13,000 square feet, I'd like to know what that cost is. Just to see, because to me, that's the decision to make, not a feature stair. Because that's 13,000 square feet of space that we have for programming for our students. Let's see. I had something that marked on that I had misunderstood, but you clarified it for me. But again, I will close with on time, on budget, and safely.
I guess I have a question based on what Greg shared. Just from my understanding, when you're doing a schematic design, the initial piece that was done in March before I joined the board, I mean, what percentage or likelihood of, how does that typically compare to when you get towards the more final, for 50%, what typically happens within this process that you have those kind of changes?
So where you're at with schematic design is that basically you've done the major space laying out and programming of the spaces and have a good idea for the types of spaces and the quantity and the adjacencies and how it's going to start to lay out. As you move into design development, that's where you're getting into more of the detail of that design of what's in those spaces and how it's being utilized and bringing in more detail. This last round of construction documents is where you're bringing in more construction detailing. You're looking at some of the conversations we've had in the last few weeks is how you're utilizing the storage space that you've got and making sure that we've got the electrical connections you need and the detail of things. Obviously, when the design development estimate came back after we completed design development and after we did the presentation to the board in August, clearly we needed to kind of take some of that time during that construction documents to bring the project back into alignment with the budget and go back a little bit to rework things. So at schematic design, it's as you get further along, there is more detail, and then therefore the estimates that you have less fewer question marks in them. There's more certainty in what's in the documents that they're creating estimates off of. So as Greg said, when you have the master plan, original imagining design estimate, that's very, 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 very high level where spaces are bubbles. And then as you get into schematic design, we brought it to a place generally where you can set a budget off of it, but there's not a lot of true definition in the actual spaces themselves of what are the finishes in this, the exact finishes in this space, what are some of the details of how it's being used that may, as you get into bringing things in, there's a reason why we have these estimate checkpoints along the way to not get to be able to do that, pulling ourselves back into alignment where it's gotten out of whack.
And I do appreciate the work that was done to say this is not realistic in terms of being over budget and how do you bring it back down. And then with respect to the roof, and the question about adding, I guess that, kind of adding that level, would that be to the existing building or taking off of the new section that's being added?
There are two things that happen. So as part, when we were having the yoga and self-defense and some programming space upstairs, we were building out over the existing building with some of that mechanical space. And that was really the first thing that we pulled back, and that was several $1 million. Just in the structural reinforcing that was going to have to happen in the roof there to make it be able to accommodate the weight load of the mechanical equipment and also just reducing footprint. And so that's where the yoga and self-defense moved downstairs. We left that mechanical space in the space to the north of the gym area, because that will never change. So in mechanical equipment, if we were ever to change the mechanical room itself, would be an investment down the road that we wanted to avoid. So while we do have rooftop equipment that's in that lower roof well now, that's something that could just, if it's not at the end of the useful life by the time Project 5 happens of the equipment, that can just be shifted up to the upper roof. It can basically be removed and reinstalled at the upper roof, as opposed to mechanical room space going away. The roofed space will still be there. It would just have to lift up. And so that back at schematic design, what had been approved was enclosing that shell space. And actually Jeremy with Gilbane can speak to some of the cost implications of the space and why it went away. But that's that really is probably a better conversation for next week. We really dive into the money.
That's fine, just understanding that it's actually over existing space.
It was, yeah.
Having done a renovation to the existing building, it is much easier when you're starting from scratch than it is to actually do it over something that already exists.
Yes.
That's helpful to understand.
Yep.
Tim?
Allison, are there other aspects that have changed that aren't reflected on the scope comparison? I'm having a hard time sort of tracking that there's a $21 million difference in just the few things that are represented here. Are there significant differences in finishes that where we said, actually we're gonna go really low ball on the finishes? I mean, I'm really curious what makes up that dollar amount.
There are some things that, yes, we certainly scaled back when it came to finishes, and there's actually a lot that nobody ever saw that, as Greg said, that was hoped for and put into our documents that didn't necessarily get put out to the public in some of those finished things. But then there was also, like I said, there's a lot of things that we did. We spent months working and really looking at, we prioritized everything we could that before hitting scope and actual footprint. And what could we bring in from an efficiency perspective? One of the things that really we hit hard was making the locker rooms, not over investing in finishes and locker rooms and making sure that they were the most efficient footprint possible. Because those aren't, while they are functional student spaces, they're not teaching spaces. We really wanted to retain as much as we, the finishes and what was necessary for the student served teaching and those functional spaces. We did scale back on finishes. The corridor renovation was looked at as this is truly necessary at this time. From the structure, we really spent a lot of time looking at the building structure, and Greg had mentioned bringing down those 2 columns. We were able to save millions of dollars in structural efficiency by doing that. It was a sacrifice that was made.
Yeah, it wasn't just the beams too. I mean,
Right.
I remember there were cement changes and all that as we were doing that. So, and I also want to throw out one thing. So, I want to summarize this in 5 easy categories from what I've heard. So I apologize I'm stepping over, but I summarized the conversations. We had enabling, which was the mechanical on the roof. Removing that had another benefit that I want to highlight. Not only was it cost benefit, but we would have had to have started that during this as spring semester started. And that would have forced us to move several student classrooms beneath that area because they couldn't exist, right, within that construction. So it has that immediate student benefit for this school semester for enabling. There's the beams in the pool, there's the 4th floor, there's a locker room shift, and then there's general category finishes that were changed throughout all of this. To my recollection, to our conversations, those are 5 big categories that changed as a result of this. that that allowed us to really go back underneath this. So it's not a matter of, it's not a matter of stripping this down to the bare bones, you know. It's going back to really kind of what we described earlier as this solid shedding, you know, so to speak.
And remind me, I know I asked you this last time, Allison, just remind us, please, who was involved, who was included in this process? Who's at the table to make these decisions?
So there was, every week, there were meetings between ourselves, Gilbane, and the district team that included Nicole Epson and Brian Byers, Greg, Tony, Jeff Bergman and Kurt from the Buildings and Grounds Department. And Linda Parker was involved in that, and Karen Sullivan as well. Anybody. But then we also have had meetings with the coaches and the PE teachers throughout the process. We're actually last week and this week sharing with them these final sets of images and walking through with them and tell us the nitty-gritty details of what you need attached to the walls and what do you need, you know. So we've had, I think this is our third or fourth in-depth round of conversations with them. And then at the beginning of the process, when we were doing the programming, obviously we met with students as well and got their feedback. So, and then there's been community presentations and discussion with the village as well, you know, throughout the process.
Thank you.
Mary Ann.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi guys. So my priority just is I think with Fred in terms of functional space. That's the most important thing to me. And you know, I'm thinking of this as a 100-year project, and lots of things can get amended, you know, 50, 70 years from now, but the footprint is going to be much harder to change. So for me, that's the part that I really want to be sure we get right. So I am concerned about losing that space, and I understand there's an additional cost that wasn't anticipated to keeping it. I would personally like to be able to vote on that cost, I think, if we're choosing between keeping it or not keeping it. So I guess and I know you guys have done a lot of work, and I'm sorry if this is feeling like springing it on you or going backwards. But that's just where my priority is. So I'll say that. And then I guess I had one question, and this is coming out of, you know, I've done one gut renovation of a historic building, and we tried very hard to preserve the historic finishes whenever we could, and it added significantly to the cost. And, you know, we were willing to do that, but you know, my contractor made it very clear that if we didn't try to reuse the old flooring, if we didn't, you know, et cetera, and so on, she could bring the cost down a lot. And, you know, it feels a little blasphemous in Oak Park to say, you know, like, well, do we really need to keep the, you know, the save the wood and salvage it and use it to make something pretty? But I guess I'm asking that question. Are there places where we've made choices for pretty or to salvage a historic piece that would be a significant enough savings that if we just did new, just, you know, and to be able to give us more wiggle room on the footprint. So, and the answer may be no, like the answer may be that it's like, well, it's like 500,000 and we're talking about 13 million and it's not gonna make a big dent. But that was, I wanted to raise that question just in case. And again, sympathies to everybody. This is very much reminding me of the weeks we went back and forth with my husband, who really wanted a pizza oven. And it just meant like 10 more square feet in the kitchen, and surely we could do that. And we finally had to say no. And Greg's moaning of the iron beam, the steel beam going away, felt very much like that. So sympathy all around. That's all I have.
I can very quickly just address high level on this, as we mentioned dollars will be discussed in 2 weeks. But we did not prioritize footprint of building on below salvaging of historic items. I think we're in some of the salvaging things, we're talking tens to maybe $100,000 versus millions of dollars for footprint. So
Let me also ask you a question, Allison. Miriam, when she asked that question, she framed discussions, I believe, largely, if not exclusively, about the fourth floor.
Yeah.
In the context of a 100-year investment, right? We want to make sure we get the footprint right, and surely we share that value, we share that concern. We do want to make sure the core of this building is right. That fourth floor, tell us about the longevity of that fourth floor and how that feeds into projects before.
So that fourth floor area, as soon as the build out happens for project 5, will be gone. So the original schematic design scope that was approved was just for a shell space, which was storage space. That was what was in the $102 million that was approved. In DD, we had hoped that we could fit that out to be a wrestling space. But that made that a much more expensive set of spaces than we had anticipated it to be. And so with moving that over to that temporary location in project 3, wrestling will be part of project 3. So then we're looking at a space that isn't actually being programmed for student use and wouldn't work as a trainer space with where it is located in the building. It's very remote from anything that they would be doing and not where they would want to be. So it became a decision of, is this, the millions of dollars of investment in a student use space versus the smaller investment for a shell space, which was still not necessarily within the budget. And that's where it came to that this is a space that's going to be going away when project 5 happens. And therefore the decision was, and to be clear, this was the last thing we cut. We went everywhere we could, hoping that we could get there without going here. And it is the last thing that we did.
I'll be real quick, just to kind of close the gap between my casual response to this and Vice President Arkin feeling like you got a lump of coal under the tree. I think we both get the iterative process where you have a schematic stage, a conceptual stage that then goes to 10%, 30%, 50% engineering. But just from a big picture standpoint, when the board in the spring authorized this project at $102 million, they thought they were getting one thing. You get into design development phase and you realize to deliver what they thought they wanted to get is actually going to cost effectively $21 million more. So that's a difference of about 20%. How typical is that degree of difference, a 20% difference between the original concept and the design development phase?
That is more than typical, I would say. But it is not completely out of the realm. But there were, and we've looked at all of that. There is just with some of the way that this process went, there's certain things that were factored into that. But it is more than we had anticipated.
What would be a usual and customary delta that you might see?
10 to 15%.
Okay. So I'm hearing that there's a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks in which we're going to get detailed information about the numbers. Is that what I was hearing?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right.
So what I would encourage the administration to be ready with is a detailed analysis of what were the key drivers in that situation that is causing that significant of a difference between conceptual phase and design development phase. And of course, I echo the sentiments of others in saying the actual student use areas being prioritized over, hey, this looks cool. The images are nice and, it's great for something to look cool, but it's just not as important as maximizing the productive use we can get out of the $102 million that have been authorized, because that's the size of the sandbox that everybody has to play with.
And I agree. We want to make sure that we have a student space. And the aesthetics are important. I mean, it sounds like they've already put a lot of work into looking at materials and reducing those costs, but you wanna walk into a place that you feel proud of. You wanna walk into a place that makes you smile. You wanna walk into a place where you feel comfortable. So I don't want us to get so, it can be a bare box. I mean, no one said that, but I think the aesthetics piece are important. I think from a pride and from just a comfort level standpoint, that I want a building that is not only completely functional, but also feels comfortable and looks nice. And so I think we have to do both.
And I would clarify that we really, that is where we went. That we actually, we pared back the types of finishes. So while what you're seeing is beautiful, it's actually very cost effective too. It is not, there's not a lot of cost to cut to make it, because we've invested a lot more in pretty. We did make sure that those spaces that are the high profile spaces got a little bit more attention than the more, you know, student corridors type spaces. But we really did pull those back to be as cost effective as we could while still looking good.
Well, I appreciate that. We're very proud of school and the community, right? And so it's a community asset. We want to look nice. We don't want anything. I don't want anything that's sterile. I mean, I want it to feel comfortable and feel like a place that's welcoming.
I want to clarify a question based off something you said, just to clarify for anybody who said this. I think when you asked your question initially, you were talking about, we had a schematic design, and then we realized that in order to deliver that schematic design, it was actually going to cost X instead of Y, right? And yes, right, there is a cost difference between those two things, but I also want to really clarify that between that schematic design, which drove the initial funding vote by the board, there was added scope as well. It wasn't just simply delivering the exact same scope in the schematic design. And if we take, that's the purpose of that middle column in this chart. We see various additions there. And it's actually at that point, not in the correction from the design, that we see the 408 seats. So that happened actually between schematic and design development. But we're talking about things like wrestling room being added, right? We are talking about the team room being added that was in project 3. And so it's not just holding true to that schematic design that we see all the way across. That's an important takeaway, I think, here. As we were whittling down the design development process, our conversations were consistently, our true north is the schematic design. Our true north is what we have to hold to, and we don't want to sacrifice that schematic design as we move forward. That's what we try to press out perfectly, but it certainly was our intent.
So what you're saying is, at the point of schematic design, there was an estimate of 102 million.
Correct.
And then in an intervening time, people said, hey, let's layer this, that, and the other on.
That's exactly.
Which gets you into August, and that's how you actually get to 123 million. Now we're diving back to somewhere between schematic design and what is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a negotiation with all that, but largely you're a swelling there in the middle. Yes.
But I think we've still lost the elements from schematic design to where we are today.
Yeah, it's not a perfect match, right? But my key point here is to just illustrate that design development isn't just simply a shift over schematic design. There was a swelling at that point. That's my only point. Okay.
I'm glad I let you go before me, because you kind of asked my questions. But I have a number of things, so. And it's kind of the pain of having, we've got 4 board members who weren't here when we had schematic design. Mm-hmm. So they don't have the memory of certain things that I'm gonna reference. So, sit down. The first piece is a word that Greg's never heard me use before, which is the process that we went through. Graham kind of asked about it, which is, in terms of the overage. Allison, you used the word budget alignment process a number of times. So as I'm hearing it, and I'm going to link that to Greg's introduction, which is our eyes got a little bit bigger than our stomach. So as I've been kind of pontificating on this. My analysis of what I just heard is it's the holidays. And we're sitting down and we're just feeding our face more than we can eat, right? And then we have this thing afterwards called the budget alignment process or a diet, right? So is that typical to have this budget alignment process?
There is a reason we have these milestone estimates.
You know,
Because because while you may have a comfort level, like, okay, this is within what we were anticipating, or okay, we're okay here, or we took something out here, so therefore it's okay to put something in there. You need those checkpoints. And there's always work that has to be done when those come in. It's very rare that you get your estimate back and you're like, oh, look, we're under budget. It's always, we need to now take that and look at the reality of what does this mean. I think, Tony, you've been through this process. There's obviously hearing from me, but Tony's also been through this process on the other side of the table as well. So there's a reason we have those, so that there's not an ugly surprise come midday or before it's too late. We have multiple ones along the way to make sure that we have the time to get ourselves where we need to be.
Yeah, it's in most projects of this magnitude, the term that you hear a lot is scope creep, where it's not a ton of scope got added at once, but one little thing it starts to add up. And as this is a normal time when this happens, and then how do you get, two things happen from there. You either then start to get back to the true nature of the project and get your budget back aligned, or you go over budget to try to get all the wants. And hearing the board directive, at least for the 5 or so months that I've been in the chair, has been, I think I've got the 3 points: on time, on budget, and safely. And we held firm to that. It said, okay, we know our direction. The wants have exceeded the demands and the needs of the project, and this is the kind of the normal time in the process to get it back on track.
And I'd say there's the things that are obvious that you can look at that say, oh, like, well, that could have happened. But there were things like when you asked, is this a typical amount? One of the very big hidden factors in this was the cost of the structure necessary of what we were doing, stacking a gym above a pool without any columns. And so that was, I would say that's outside of that, where we then had to do a gut check on what to do with that.
Yeah, because I mean, and I'm just going back to the beginning, because this table is very, very helpful, okay? Because having been involved in this project from the get-go, and Mr. Arkin was with me, we want to follow the imagined plan. That's column 1, right? And so everything that's outside of that means we weren't listening to that. Number 2 is we want to focus on things that meet student needs, not wants. And 3 was, we don't need the Cadillac in what we're doing. And what I'm hearing here is now we had to go back to that which was kind of been said. So we're not listening to ourselves is what I'm hearing through that process. And yes, maybe that is why you need a budget alignment process, because we don't listen to ourselves through the discipline of this. But that's kind of my holiday analogy is we sit there and put the food down there and it's in, and then it feels not good the day after the holiday, and then the diet, right? I mean, get ready for this, folks. That's that, getting more specific now, a couple scope related items, because I do, the alignment process to get within the scope, right? There are a couple, I'd say, things that aren't in my mind kosher to me. Okay, on February the 28th or thereabouts, we were presented a bunch of alternates.
Right.
One included was to self-hallway renovation for $379,000, just as an example, right? And the board voted and said yes. So that was kind of a vote for that specific element, which in my mind is scope.
Yes.
Okay, and that took the total from X to X plus $400,000 to get to our 102. And now the 102 is without that $400,000. So that's where I'm adamant that we've got to be true and clear. And this document puts it front and center. So that I appreciate the transparency of it, but of scope, we on time, on budget, safely, with the scope that we set. I mean, I can give you something on time, on budget, and safely, and give you a box, right? But it doesn't meet all of the scope needs. So that's the piece and the other one is the square footage, because the 102 was done for 187,000, and now we're less, which is the concern. So just going through my 3 other comments. One is in scope, and I just am the one who said this last time. In scope here, this is a building without heating and ventilation. Correct?
No, this is one that is designed for geothermal with, like I said, we have a plan for, should you not move forward with geothermal, how that will change. So we have a plan that will,
a plan in terms of sequence, but in terms of cost?
Cost is in there.
The cost is in here.
Correct, the cost for project 2, obviously, there's a separate budgeting conversation for the geothermal.
Okay, but okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
if no geothermal, we have a great building, but it's not heated, I like heat, at least, okay, good, you covered that one. My last, that's HVAC, that's square footage. My last comment is just, it's for you, Tony, get you in the game. The focus I've seen on this lead certification, correct? And it sounds good, right? But I think our sustainability plan has other goals and requirements. I don't think it says we need to have a certain lead certification. So, that might be a nice trophy, but I just want to make sure when we communicate it or what we're doing is in alignment with our sustainability plan, okay? You can get some of these certifications, but does it meet the true greenhouse gas requirements and such that we want? That's what our sustainability plan is, and so we just should make sure we're in alignment with that from a scope standpoint, okay? And I think that covers my questions. Thank you.
You get the team to respond. What do you see as the benefits of LEED certification as part of this project?
So the LEED certification, in all honesty, with the goals that the district has set, that is where we landed already. And so with the LEED certification, it basically holds everybody along the different steps of the process to a certain standard to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing along the way. And it allows you to, it is like you said, those bragging rights. Obviously, we were going to design it to do this, to do it no matter what, but it holds just a next level standard of accountability all the way through.
I'm gonna undo, because this kind of fits to our design and geothermal discussion. I'm just gonna plant one seed, because if I forget those, because our village just
Yeah.
voted for a, what is it? An electrification plan, which does not apply to us as a district, to my knowledge.
Correct.
So we can choose to go in a different direction than our village, but the work that we're doing on geothermal would be in line with what our village is. If we don't do it, then we would be going counter to what our village just voted from a policy standpoint.
It goes into effect January 1st.
Yes. So. Right.
So thank you for that conversation and everything. I want to make sure as we move away from here, we plan to come back in 2 weeks, that I know what our questions are and our asks are in front of us. And at the risk of oversimplifying the feedback that we have for that's actionable, what I generally hear is we want cost elements associated with which is what we had planned anyway, I just want to clear. Cost elements associated with some of those scope differences that we see throughout that. I mean, that really is the running theme throughout much of the commentary. If there's something that's an addition to that, I'd like to make sure that's named. But that's really what I hear here. Is that right?
Yes. I had two, you just triggered two other things.
I was hoping to get more.
One of them is just in response to that item, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
Because the on time, on cost, safely, a mantra is if we, are entertaining doing, the Miriam, you were asking about, possibly adding back or something like that. That could mean we have to reconsider how we finance this project. So if we change the costs, that changes those decisions. This is all tied together. We don't have a bottomless well of money to pull from, so.
Greg, the only other thing I heard was the difference in the square footage. So I don't know like how much space, the shell, the schematics and stuff, that's the only other request I heard, was like the difference of 2,000.
So square footage differences for individual spaces, not just the stone that we
When
see.
you're looking at those two, I understand what adds up to that difference.
All right, so specific square footage differences in the various spaces we see, and then the cost elements. Got it.
The other question I had, which may not fit, because right now this is focused on the scope, but this is more for just a general, the bids would be going out in the February?
So January.
January 12th.
Yeah, January, we will vote at
Yes.
January 11th board meeting, and we will the next day send our final documents to Gilbane to put out on the street the following, probably Tuesday.
And is there any thumb in the air of what the bidding climate might be on January 12th, 2024?
Jeremy, I knew you were here for a reason. Come on up.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to predict what the climate is. We'll be on January 12th, but given the long-term, stance of this project, that it puts backlog on contractors, on their books for 1.5 to 2 years. It's a pretty attractive project. We've already been talking with a lot of contractors that we generally work with and kind of putting the word on the street that this is coming so that they're aware that the bid is coming out. We're gonna do some more contractor outreach and things like that to drum up interest, but so far, summer is busy is what we're hearing. People are loading up for summer with the typical schoolwork that everybody sees. But beyond that, people are looking for work. So The bidding environment is pretty good from what we're seeing on other projects right now.
Thank you. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So the details.
Security.
Open.
No. Oh. Awesome.
Okay. Leave them out.
No, it's all right. It's governance.
There's like a 10%.
Governance. This is for Bob. We get to talk about more goals.
It's
5 minutes.
5 minutes to give us? Wow.
Somebody coming back.
Lisa, write that in the minutes, please.
Well, okay. The next segment. Our last. Is that our last?
No, we have policy on the first read.
Okay, our governance. So governance is something I've asked Greg that we have as a standing item on our board agendas. Because in our goals, we do have a number of governance issues. I'm just gonna share 3 things and be done. One is that I've given out some assignments. Graham and I will be drafting some recommended norms. I have some recommendations on, or I'm going to present a draft for how we handle the different committee activities. So those are both kind of in play. Those are governance related issues. The other governance one was.
Oh, that's a topic we want to discuss at some point down the road.
Was the question of student voice at the board table. And so at this point, we just need to schedule that as a meeting item, as an agenda item. So I can put that, we can find that in the next month or so, that we would put that on the agenda for governance. Okay, so I'm just getting consensus of the board on that. And that way, Dr. Johnson can be prepared. Okay, that's it for governance. Okay, thank you. Next, we have Bob. Did we do 5 minutes?
That's good.
All right, man. I had a story about that. 5 minutes. 5 minute governance.
Cost me meets goal.
We'll have everybody wanting to read them. Okay. Policies for first read. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I guess I'll put my sandwich away. All right. So this is we've had our first flight of policies from Trust Plus that have been revised for various purposes. A lot of these are fairly straightforward. Again, this is the first read to see if the board has any questions about the policies that we see here. There's no formal presentation. And the plan is that pending the conversation we have here, for us to bring these back to the board in 2 weeks for approval. And Lisa, we have, I believe, broken the policies that have come to us through press into 3 chunks. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we'll be doing this here in December. We'll be doing it again in January, and you'll be seeing policies again in February. All right. These are pretty. We view these largely as fairly transactional lot right now. We don't see this as particularly controversial or complicated. And feel free to read that as not needing much discussion. So go ahead, it's all yours.
Are there any questions on the policies that I'm not going to go through them individually. If people have questions, we can get them. I'm not going through them because I can't get my poor dogs to work, so. I don't know, I lost it. Questions? Okay, very good. That's it. Future agenda items. Hearing none. I move to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting at 10:04 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed?
Don't go anywhere. We have a special meeting.
Yeah. Yes, we have a special meeting. Those will be done. Okay. There's something. We have the personnel report. We have to do the personnel report.
That's all right.
Okay,
You don't understand. I don't like who you.
you ready, Lisa?
Yeah, go ahead.
I call the order special board meeting at 10:09 p.m. On the
If you didn't know me.
December 2023 in the boardroom.
We could be a phone.
And have roll call. Here.
Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Dr. Maharaj.
Here.
Mr. Randall.
Here.
And Mr. Cobb.
Here. Do we have any public comment?
None.
We have public comment?
None.
Bob looks like he's ready to make some comment. Stand up to the mic, please. This is a special meeting? Yes. Very special. Okay, I move, and hearing none, we will move to our action items. Our action item is I move to approve the personnel recommendation, including new hire transfers, resignations, and releases.
Second.
And any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
Ms. Williams Lee.
Yes.
Dr. Livingston.
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Brandhorst.
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane.
Yes.
Mr. Kowski.
Yes, it passes 7-0, and our next item is future agenda items. Is there any new future agenda items? Seeing none, I move to adjourn the special board meeting at 10:06 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it.